welcome you to the week 4 discussion group. So we're the 13th of December. So this is the week before the final week of the digital modules of Survey Scholar. So I hope that many of you, as you're progressing this week and thinking about completion next week, are getting that sense of completion and accomplishments. You know the rules, and we have people from Côte d'Ivoire, that's Polenfo, Mohammed Imran Qureshi from Lahore, Pakistan, Umea, Sweden, that's Aliu So, Dharmesh Kumar from Delhi. Anybody else? We had some people reporting where they're connecting from before the session started. So AJ in Geneva, Helen Kuo in, guessing that's Baltimore, Carolina in Atlanta, Simon in Sierra Leone, Rachel Suryong in Abuja, Dalil in London, Lina in Geneva, Bo in Bulgaria, in Sofia, Annika in New York, Joseph in Zimbabwe, Farah in Senegal. All right, so we're hoping to have a great level of participation and hoping that you're feeling the energy as we're moving towards your next deadline, which of course is to submit your 3 peer reviews. Yeah, you've been through this twice before, so this should be familiar and hopefully comfortable. We're going to be focusing on this peer review with the course team, hopefully providing guidance that will be helpful to you in completing those peer reviews, identifying some of the issues that they have observed in your work that are recurring, and sharing advice. So that is basically the agenda for today. We do have an activity that Carolina has prepared, which will involve all of the members of the course team, and require your participation about looking at figures and finding their strengths as well as their weaknesses. Now, basically, the checklist for week 4 is very simple. Keep looking at community updates as they're posted, and really the overarching goal this week is to submit your 3 peer reviews by the end of the week, which in Survey Scholar is on Sundays. Reminder of office hours, in particular Carolina's, she's available on Saturday, so I thought that her office hours would be especially popular as many of you focus. Oh, and so none of you have seen the slides. Okay, thanks, Carolina. I've been showing slides which none of you have been seeing, obviously. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. And thanks, Aliu, as well, for reporting this. Okay, and I'm hoping you can see the screen full size. This is a GoToTraining bug, or you often have to fiddle with when you're sharing only a window. Okay, so yeah, wanted to mention, obviously, John's and Dale's office hours on Thursday and Friday, and Carolina's, which are on Saturday. So Carolina's office hours seem especially well suited for people who are working on the weekends, even though you're of course encouraged to come to the course team with any issues or questions before the weekend, if at all possible. So a quick reminder, you've been seeing this schedule every week. We're now in week 4. And you've been through this at least twice before. Some of you have completed other Scholar courses. So, really completing the 3 peer reviews. And then next week, the focus will really be on revising, improving, finalizing your respective projects, whether you're a survey manager or a survey analyst. And that's what that's perhaps the most important step. One of the key aspects of assessing participants' performance in the course is to actually look at the difference between your initial draft and the final version. So we will be looking for substantive changes. We do see some people who change a comma here and a dot there and submit their draft. That is just not what is intended. You're really, especially because the course team will be giving you expert feedback in addition to the yes, often excellent peer review feedback you're receiving from colleagues, fellow participants in the course. So we really want you to yes, to make substantive changes that will demonstrate, yes, the significant, yes, learning and progress that you've been able to make going from one version to the next. So now I have the set of slides prepared by Carolina for today's first activity, and want to, yes, going to hand it over to you, Carolina. So I have the first slide with good practices for graphs, but I'm sure you have a few, um, an introduction to share and explain what you have in mind for this set.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. First, just a little reminder, maybe for the analysts that may not know what the Survey Manager track is doing. We ask the team to produce the discussion and like the report, discussion and results section. So taking 3 tables that we gave them, we asked them to discuss the main findings, to highlight the main findings, and then discuss from a table a general description of the population in the survey. The second table was the crude coverage, meaning the coverage with the vaccines and the age of the survey, regardless of the timing of the vaccination, by card and recall, and dropout, meaning the getting the first dose in a series, and then if you receive, what percentage also goes on to receiving the next one, so which ones drop out of this series. And last, we gave an optional figure, an optional table that they could choose to interpret and discuss. Then another of the requests was to do at least one graph or figure for highlighting one of the results. Some people have done many, but the request was doing at least one. And then finally, there were 2 additional parts. One, to really the so what of the survey, what were the main conclusions according to the data you reviewed, and finally, what were some recommendations you could give based on the results of this survey. So we have been looking at the creator project submitted quickly, of course, because there are many, and I wanted to really highlight 2 points. I think most people were okay at interpreting the tables, at discussing, highlighting some of the limitations. I think the word bias is now very familiar to everyone, and you're thinking about potential selection biases, potential ascertainment or information biases. So we wanted to focus on the figures. We received many graphs. So just a reminder here that the graphs should be really self-explanatory. That a graph, if I see it outside your report, it should have an informative title. So what is presenting? Where is it coming from? Is it from Nigeria? Is it from Cambodia? Is it from the US? Is it from where? What part of Nigeria even? And when. So this is coming from the NICS 2016-17 as an example. Also, subtitles or footnotes, if added, are to include important information. For example, if you're using an acronym in the graph, it should be spelled out in the footnote, for example. If you're presenting a fully immunized child and you're just presenting as such, you need to include a definition of what that means in this context, because as we discussed, it's not the same. So in this context was certain vaccines only. Labels. Labels should be there. That's really important, and that's some parts that were missing in some of the graphs. Labels should be there for all axes, and to explain what the colors means if you're using different colors, and should be clear. So it should be really, if it's in percentage, if it's if it's a state, etc. Also, just a reminder to be mindful of scales. So especially if you're presenting multiple graphs, comparing sort of the same thing, let's say between different regions, different states, they really need to ideally have the same scale. So your eye, it's really drawn to make a comparison that is meaningful. And usually most, at least for coverage, we usually go from 0 to 100%. Also, when you present percentages, it's usually for this type of data, it's much better to present a rounding percentage, a rounded percentage, or max with 1 percentage point, but really avoid the many digits after the period. Also, be clear whether you're presenting a percentage or a proportion. Some people include it in their title proportion and then it's percentage, and the other way around. Particularly for this exercise, it's really important that we, when we are presented unweighted analysis, that we include the N, the number of observations. And for survey weighted proportions or percentages, in as much as possible, we want you to include uncertainty, so the 95% confidence intervals. So if okay, I would like to have somebody in the team start with the first graph. So if you can move to the next one, because this was original. I picked some original graphs. So one of the participants, as his or her graph, presented the age and sex distribution, but if you look at the labels, there are some issues. So I want John actually to describe this and explain what could have been done differently.
Okay, thank you so much, Reda, and thank you, Carolina, for the introduction. So in front of us, you're seeing what's called a population pyramid. This is a very important graph, as it is one of the first graphs that is usually presented. You can either present it as a table or as a graph. The table obviously is usually more appealing, and the purpose of the population pyramid is to show the age and sex composition of the population that you're talking about. So Carolina has covered a few issues, and I think let me just highlight things that really that have been done really well. So there's a label where the graph is coming from, but this is, I think this is Nigeria 2016-17, not 2014. And also on the y-axis is labeled, and then the color codes have been you know that the red represents the female and the blue represents the male. However, when you look at the x-axis or the horizontal axis, there is these percentages go from -18 to 18, which really does not make sense. I think what the person who made this graph intended to do is to show that 18% goes on either side. Not there is no negative 18%. So there's a small tweak you can do if you whichever application you're doing with, to ensure that you don't have negative numbers from on your axis. And the second thing is ensure that the bars are on the same level, so that when you're talking about the males 0 to 4 years, you're also talking about females 0 to 4 years. So currently there is a feeling that the females are probably one group older than the males of the same age group. Otherwise, this is a very good graph, and yeah, I'd like to commend the person who came up with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John.
The next one.
All right, and yeah, go ahead.
Okay, So the next one, it's another graph that, or figure that was unusual. It's a map of Nigeria highlighting where the point estimates were showing a coverage with pentavalent 3, where well, this is what we're assuming is yes, pentavalent 3 is in the label, sorry, is less than 50%, and then the other cluster of, or the other groups of states where coverage was more or equal to 50%. So in this graph, again, what is nice is that the title is very complete. It tells us exactly what it's doing, and the label, the colors are labeled properly, so you really know what you're looking at. Next one. This is probably one of Dale's favorites, so I'm going to pass to him because this is one of the graphs. Many people presented coverage, but what is nice about this one is these little lines that Dale will explain.
Thanks for zooming in, Rita. So this is terrific. This is showing, we can tell from the title, this is showing DTP3 or Penta3 coverage for the states in each region. So we've broken the figure into two portions. We can tell immediately which states are in which region. Instead of ordering the states alphabetically, which is a common practice and is helpful for finding your particular state quickly, but these figures are ordered by the magnitude of the coverage estimate, which I think is helpful for absorbing the material in the figure. And then we have a reference line. In each side we have the reference line showing coverage for Nigeria. That's probably not quite labeled correctly because it's, well, I don't actually, maybe it is. Maybe if it's from the table, yes, yeah, okay, so the green line is for Nigeria overall, and so that puts the coverage of the states in context. You can see where is coverage with respect to the national coverage, and then each region has a reference line shown in red or purple there to show what is the weighted average of the regional level coverage. So I think it's terrific. We could have also added around those reference lines, you know, some confidence intervals, but that would maybe be a little more messy. So I think this is quite clear. It's easy to figure out. The left labels go all the way from 0 to 100, which is helpful. I like this graph a lot.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Carolina, shall we go to the
next one? To the next
okay.
one. And
yep.
Just remember that these are, oops, what happened here? It's not showing. It got.
Yeah, that's probably, yeah.
It's a white cow in a snowstorm.
Okay, so basically, let's forget this one. What it was nice about this one, it's that it had the rural versus urban. So we'll skip for now. Now, this next graph will ask the participants to describe and to tell us what they find useful and like about this graph. Remember that these are graphs that actually people in the managers track have developed for their projects. So I have just picked a few to illustrate some points. So over to any participant who wants to talk about it.
Okay, so let's call for a volunteer. We know it's not Simon, even though his hand is raised, but Dr. Mohammed Imran Qureshi, let me unmute you. And yes, go ahead, Doctor.
So thank you very much, Reda and Carolina. Of course, Dale is there. So the good points about this graph, first of all, looking at the title. So title is quite well explanatory. Places children receive vaccines in Nigeria, combined mix and NICS 2016 and 17 is the survey for this graph. And the good points in this graph is clearly mentioned the labels in two colors, northeast showing in the blue color and the southeast shown in red color. And then you can clearly see from the government hospitals the two bars, and the bar axis is being selected between 0 to 80. So as there is maximum below 80, so they haven't selected 100 in this axis, so which is quite good to know. Then is the government health center again showing clearly And then again, another beautiful concept of a mobile and outreach clinic by government services. So obviously this is going to describe about the mode of service delivery. And then private facility, including the NGOs. And lastly is there the campaigns and SIS. So they have tried to figure out many things in just one graph, and they have nicely depicted on the x-axis and the y-axis. So on the whole, it looks a very good graph. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Carolina, are there additional comments or feedback you'd like to give to Mohammed?
No, thank you for the explanation. I agree with you that that is well labeled. It includes the N. So it's not clear to me just looking at this whether this is weighted or not. So that's one question I would pose to the author of this graph. And then and in the frequency of places used for vaccination, it would be useful also if the person put that it's in percentage. But I don't know if we'll move on because there are many more graphs, but that's the kind of thing we want you to think about. The next one.
Okay, I've now switched over to your original PowerPoint, so if you'd like to go back to the previous, to the figure that was messed up, we can.
Okay, sounds good. It's there, so let's look at it. So this was the figure we couldn't see before. It's the estimated percentage of children 12 to 23 months with any evidence of vaccination, and this graph has the nice features of having very good footnotes explaining what they mean with any evidence by area and national level in Nigeria. Again, beauty of this graph, particularly like that is black and white, that is actually very useful for printing and whatnot. And that it really, the differences between coverage in urban and rural levels pop up everywhere, meaning that urban is much higher than rural across the different vaccines. The only thing that I would do different, again, with this graph, it could be maybe to go to 100% in the coverage and include the confidence intervals or some measure of uncertainty. The next one, so we can go down. It's for the participants to describe.
Right, so let's ask for another volunteer. Thank you, Mohammed, for being so quick to respond. I'm sure there are others who are eager to step up to comment on this figure. But so far I do not see any hands raised, so I think it would be fair to arbitrarily... Okay, so here we go. Robin, I would love to hear from you, Robin. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? It's okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Very good. No, I thought I'd put my hand up because I actually, this is my graph. And I took the 11 states data in the alphabetical order that they were presented, plus the all Nigeria data, and displayed them in groups of 4 different dropout rates. Color-coded, of course, as in the legend at the bottom, with a label that these are vaccination dropout rates for the selected northeast and southeast states in Nigeria, etc., etc. Labeled both axes. Carolina's point about sample size is good, that where possible an N should be, sample size should be included. I'm not sure if that would have been appropriate in this case. It possibly could have been fitted somehow along the x-axis. What else? Oh, and I've always been taught that percentage ranges should run from 0 to 100. Otherwise, you sometimes give a false impression of the importance or lack of importance of certain data. But not everybody perhaps uses that convention. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Robin, for that self-review, and we do encourage you to do that. Fateh Asmatullah says a line graph would be easier to understand, and we do have Shahnawaz Jiskani, who also I believe would like to comment on this one. Carolina, shall we hear from Shah firsthand, or shall we move to the next figure? That's your call. You need to unmute yourself, of course.
If it's quick, let's go with him, and then Simon we'll have Simon for the next one after I comment on the next one first. Okay. Okay.
So I haven't figured out why, but Simon always has his hand raised, and I don't believe he's actually.
No, he mentioned it.
All right. So Shahnawaz Jiskani, welcome. You are unmuted, and we'd love to hear you follow up on Robin's self-review of the figure. Okay, it seems at least I'm not hearing Shahnawaz Jiskani or other people. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, we can't hear you, unfortunately, Shah. If you could type your comments into the chat, but I do see that Fateh Asmatullah has his hand raised. All right. And again, you'll be looking at some of these graphs. You may be getting to peer review one of them. So this is also about practicing how you give feedback, knowing that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Basically, the graph should be in such a way which facilitate and makes the viewer easy to understand. So one thing in this graph, that a lot of lines I cannot compare, for example, one state with the other state. So it would be much easier if we put the line graphs, because there are 4 different variables for 11 different states. So 4 lines are easier to understand, and which vaccine dropout is higher. This is also more easy to understand as well as to compare from one state to the other. Secondly, we should put a benchmark line, for example, at 10%, that it should be like at 10% at least. So it will make things easier, and even we can put pop-ups, for example, the 2 or 3 important pop-ups where the maximum dropout is there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carolina, do you want to comment or follow up on that?
So let's go to the next one, because it's one of the points that was raised. It's shown differently in the next graph. Okay. So I think the point that the previous person raised was having many bars. This is a graph that shows the dropout just for vaccines. The disadvantage of this graph is that it doesn't have really a proper title, in the sense that we don't know if it's all of Nigeria, and also the percentage has a decimal point that it's not really needed in the y-axis. But what is nice about this graph, and that's why I put it here, it's to highlight it's quickly that one can see that the biggest dropout is BCG to DTP3, which it's a little counterintuitive for many. If we know immunization, we would expect probably that people are being dropped throughout the series, whereas here we really see that the lowest dropout, it's between DTP1 or Penta1 and MCV1, measles containing vaccine 1. Again, another thing would be useful here is to put some of the acronyms that are not very common, like a DTP-CV, which is DTP containing vaccine. But in any case, I think just looking at the bars here, this is a graph that I like because it raises questions. But again, we should just label this, and it would be a useful graph with some also statics corrections. And in the chat, John put a link to a place where you can really look at how to do better graphs with Excel. So the next one is for the next caller, and if you don't mind.
Carolina, we do have quite a few comments in the chat. Do you want to take the? Do you think we?
Not yet, because
Okay.
I think some of them are going to be addressed later. So I want maybe one of the participants, Simon, I think he had his hand raised actually, to comment on this one.
Okay, so let's try Simon, but I believe it's actually a technical issue. Simon, go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, Simon, welcome. So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. This it's a line graph. It has a title showing varied coverage percentage by dose by polio of polio for the two states. It has a well-labeled x-axis and y-axis. It shows a general decline along the way in the number of valid coverage percentages. Though, well, it is like a trend. I don't know if it's a trend of declining coverage. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we're still hearing you. There seems to be some static on the line. I don't know if that's coming. Yeah. Let me see if that's coming from Lokesh. Yes, please continue.
Yeah, so it's like a trend for each of the states along the three doses of polio. I don't know if this is the best to show the coverage, the valid coverage percentage, because it's very hard for me to know which the actual percentage at the moment, because you have to keep following. I thought it would be easier to show like the different dose and show a numeric value of the varied coverage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. All right, Carolina, follow-up comments and and so we want to encourage participants to keep chatting, and thank you to the course team for taking the time to respond to some of the comments.
So just a follow-up to this graph. I think we selected this graph because it has, again, good title, good labels, and it's unusual. It's one of the different ones that we got, where really just show that the valid doses are the percentage coverage that is valid. It's very low, first of all, and it's lowest in IOVE, for example, in this graph. So, and the other thing that at the same time this graph shows how valid doses with the different polio 1, 2, or 3 are different. So this is not really to we can always make improvements, and that will be your work actually to provide feedback to your fellow participants when you're doing the peer review. But just for the sake of time, these are just examples, and also remember that you were asked as managers, you were provided with many tables that you were asked to do at least one graph total for your creator project. Many people did more, that's fine, but please do read the rubric when you're reviewing. Dr. Dharmesh also suggests, for example, using a footnote. That's the kind of thing that you would have to suggest to your fellow scholars. So the next one, it's a difficult graph. So who's going to take a stab at it? If you can make it, while people take a look, let's give them maybe 15, 20 seconds to even take it in, because it's a busy graph, but it has very interesting information.
So we do have a volunteer, Mohammed, but as you say, it's to be fair, we need to little bit of time to give this due consideration. And if you need to zoom in, you do have in the window where you see the screen, the slide being shared, you do have a zoom button. So we'll be going to you, Mohammed, unless there is another volunteer. Okay, Mohammed, are you able to hear me and speak to us? Welcome.
So thank you very much, Reda, once again. So again, the graph being selected is one of the very good graph, as there is a very clear title in this graph: weighted estimated crude percentage coverage of fully vaccinated children aged 12 to 23 months with any evidence of vaccination and percentage of cards seen in Nigeria combined mixed NICS survey data set 2016 and 17. So basically, the above title is very clear, and then we can see percentage fully vaccinated and percentage card seen in two different colors, blue and red. Then in the down, you can see many good things, and obviously there are some points which need to be reconsidered over here. So on the y-axis, there are the percentages from 0 to 70, and it would be better to have like 0 to 100 if it at all it is possible. Then we are having on the x-axis many other comparatives and indicators over here, like geopolitical zone shown in the first phase. Then we have area-wise, then sex-wise, then caretakers-wise, caretakers age-wise, wealth index, ethnicity, and then obviously the two eastern states, north and south. Here, as there are many indicators coupled in just one graph, so one can easily interpret all these parameters and indicators easily from viewing this graph. And obviously, graph is well explained over here, and they have already put the many footnotes to explain. Especially important, the definition of fully vaccinated means the child had evidence of receiving BCG, OPV 1, 2, 3, and then Penta 1, 2, 3, and obviously measles. So this clear cut explains what does this fully vaccinated means in this context. And then they have already shown this percentage card seen. So this is again very good. So you can see the gender, coverage over here in terms of fully vaccinated and in terms of the card. Then you have this geopolitical and wealth index. So these are the very good parameters and indicators, I believe. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. So there are in the chat, Jethro says this graph is too busy. Carolina, there is a slide coming up with resources and tips about graphs. Talil says the graph is overcrowded and difficult to read and interpret. Shanawaz Jiskani asks where are fully vaccinated graph. Meka Batachan says it's not understandable. James says, I like this graph, though some people may say it is too busy. Fareaz Matule, for me it should be divided into 3 slides. Ashwini Narasanavar says it is not easy to interpret. So obviously there's some very diverse perspectives and opinions about the value and of this graph. Carolina, what's your...
I picked this graph because even though at first look it feels a little busy, it really is thought-provoking to me. It provides a lot of information, but what it strikes me is that the percentage of cars seen follows very closely coverage across different dimensions. So one could really wonder about the role of cars here with even the coverage estimated. And just discussing here, looking at this graph yesterday, one would ask some questions related to, for example, the relation between cards and not only coverage, but just look at, for example, at these variables only among those with cards, for example. And then it relates a little bit to the slide. It's slide 9, I think it is, in this, if you go back. No, sorry. Yes, yes, that one, slide 9. One more. That here there are things that are interesting, including that would make you want to go and investigate missed opportunities, for example. So there are graphs that just show data and others that elicit some questions. and again, not every graph is going to be of the liking of most people, but what we want you to do, it's really to look at the first slide here on if it has the labels, if it's well documented, and then if you have suggestions on how to improve it, great. So for Felicity, we'll pass the mic to her because she wanted to comment on one of the slides. So Felicity, go ahead.
Yes, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, okay. So I think these are wonderful examples and a great discussion of issues that so far have concentrated mainly on the method of presentation of the data, and some very important points have been made about how best to present the information. But I'd like to also remind us all that looking at figures and tables, we should go back and check whether we think that what we're seeing represents the truth. And so there's a couple of things that make me ask myself a question when I look at slide 11 and slide 9. So slide 11, I don't know if my pointer is showing to everyone, but the coverage of fully vaccinated for Nigeria is about 23%. But then when you look at each zone, there's only the northwest that has much lower coverage. North Central is a little bit more than Nigeria as a whole, Northeast a little bit lower than Nigeria as a whole, and then you have much higher coverage in three of the zones. So unless the Northwest represents a huge part of the overall coverage in Nigeria, and I don't know the population of Nigeria well enough to know, the first thing I would want to know is, has this analysis, is this correct? Has there been a mistake somewhere? Is there a mistake in the weighting? Because it's so easy to make a mistake that the first thing I do when I look at figures and tables is ask myself, is there anything here that makes me think I might have made a mistake? And so I don't know if everybody's followed me, but for me, this average coverage for Nigeria being lower than 4 of the 6 zones makes me ask myself a question as to whether there's been a mistake there. And I would have on slide 9, if we could quickly look at that. Again, this looks to me, I see here that DPT1 to measles dropout is 14%, but DPT1 to DPT3 dropout is more than double that at 34%. And now, if it's from mixed, then I know sometimes measles coverage may include vaccines that have been given in a campaign. So this might be true. It could easily be true, but the fact that it is so different from the DPT1 to DPT3, the first thing I would want to do would be just to go back and double check the data to make sure that that's real. So I just wanted to make that point again, that we've talked a lot about presentation, but also look at the content and just use this opportunity. Have I made a mistake somewhere? Because we all make mistakes, and this is the time to identify them. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. Back to you, Carolina. There are many comments in the ongoing conversation in the chat. Are there any points or follow-up?
Just what John has replied on the chat, but I think it would be useful if he mentions it for the recording. So John, if you can talk about it.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a very good point from Felicity. I agree that when you look at the figures don't speak to the total, but because of the way the assignment was created, there are 2 other regions which have much bigger weights and also much lower coverage than the northeastern zones. So that is what was pulling the national average to much lower. So for this example, and I think being wanting to do the right thing, what we should have done is, by presenting the 2 zones, then we should have probably recalculated the zonal, the total or the zonal average for the 2 zones. But for the sake of the assignment, this is what we have. But very good point from Felicity. And hope she understands now how come this does not speak, what we are seeing does not speak to the national average. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Carolina?
For the sake of time, so they are really, really good questions. And to Felicity for the measles-containing vaccine and that dropout, I think that needs exploring more, because remember that here we're relying on recall a lot. So it would be interesting, for example, to see just among those with cards and to look at missed opportunities to see if children actually are coming back, getting the measles-containing vaccine, but not being brought up to speed with the Penta. So the next graph is slide number 12. It's just to finish this section. Many people were asking examples of good graphs. We don't have enough time, so I just put some useful resources here for visualizations, some checklists, some tutorials on how you can make different graphs, and for people who were asking how to put confidence intervals, for example, in a bar graph, it's there. Gapminder, I love that tool. It would be just fun for you to have a look. And there are tools there that you can even do maps and you can do other things using Gapminder and it's free with the information you have. So because again, for the sake of time, if anybody feels that the question was not answered, please stay after the end of the hour because we need to continue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Carolina. So I have one more just as a reminder to everyone, but you've seen this before and you are definitely working with it this week. This is just the criterion in the rubric for a figure. So as you're working in peer review, look at this, but also think about the considerations and specific questions and that we've just discussed. So again, you'll have to assign the rating to one of the figures if there's more than one. But so this is for the survey managers. All right. So next up is really, let me see, is that basically we have the analyst hour this week, which is going to be about 13 minutes long. And what we're hoping to do there is to have a survey analyst walk us through a project that they're reviewing, or having Dale look at, share his comments and insights about a particular project. And and I do have, so Dale, I'm going to unmute you, and I'm thinking, given on the stats we've seen about where people are at with respect to peer review, both on the analyst and the manager side, I believe our best option is going to be to have you looking at the project of your choice.
Okay, thank you, Rita. I will go ahead and share my screen. I am.
Yeah, let me make you the presenter. They're great.
Okay, let's see. So I am with the majority of the group in that I haven't done my formal evaluations yet. So I'm just speaking off the cuff. I've brought up one particular project here, and we want to show the rubric on the right, I think, right?
So that's under feedback. It's you click on the feedback tab, and then
yes, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to orient, so there are a few people sitting in on this module who haven't been through the earlier modules, and so the process of peer review will be new for you. If those of you who are new haven't been able to find where you've been assigned projects to review, or haven't been able to go in and find them yet, then let us know, let the course team know, so that we can orient you. So in this case, we have the student's project is in the left window. I'll scroll here. This is what the students submitted. They put tables and figures, pasted, it looks like images of tables and some handsome figures into the project, and then In this case, they pointed to the attachments. Perhaps there, in many cases, there are attachments also. And then over on the right, as Rita mentions, to remind yourself, you can print the rubric and have it beside you. That might be helpful. But on the right, Rita has pasted all of the content of the rubric into the window here. And this is where we do our evaluation. There are the various criteria from the rubric. So now if you look at the right side of the screen instead of the left, you see all the sections of the rubric: format and presentation, the plans, the table shells, the completed tables. You can remind yourself of what we're looking for or the questions to ask yourself. And then you assign the rating using the drop-down. We assign them using this, or this is just a reminder of the rating. This is the reminder of the rating. And then if you want to, right, so under feedback, there's the tab here for rubric. And then to assign your rating, you click on review the work. You have a slider, so the default for every category is a 0. If you don't take an action to assign a rating higher than 0 for your colleague, then that portion of their work will be rated as a 0. Pardon me, so you can slide the slider here to a different number. And then in addition to giving the quantitative rating, which is helpful, the vast majority of the helpful content here should come in the explanation. And note that the default is for the tool to ask you to say more. So if I just say good, that's not very helpful. It may make the colleague feel good for a moment, but we want to tell them specifically what are the things that you liked, what are the things that need work, and give some substantive detail here. And this is a case where you want to do unto others as you would have them do to you. So give some good explanation there. And then you can see on the right that I believe these things are equally weighted. Every element carries the same weight in the overall score. And when you've completed all that, then you can click Submit on the Submit button. So my practice would be probably to print out the rubric and have it sitting beside me on a printed piece of paper, and then to just go through to read the overall presentation. This one is nicely marked out in the outline of the. I can see already that the organization follows the assignment. The outline follows the assignment. So we've got introduction to the analysis plan, and then talking about the data cleaning process. So I would go through and read it. If there were important attachments, then I would download and open them. In this case, the attachments have been pasted in, or the tables have been pasted in here. And so then I just would go through the rubric item by item and try to give some substantial feedback bit by bit.
So Dale, what are some of the suggestions or advice that you can offer in sort of the first pass? The first time you're looking at a project, how do you check, for example, that all the different what are the pieces that you're looking for? What are some of the basic things that you would be looking for as you're having a first glance at a project for peer review?
Yeah, is anything obviously missing? Is anything substantially shorter than I would have expected it to be? Is anything substantially longer, I guess, than I would have expected it to be? And then you need to read the content and evaluate. A lot of the criteria have to do with whether the item is addressed in a fairly complete manner and addressed in a fairly clear manner. So I think at this point that you need to begin reading. This one appears to have everything we're looking for. It addresses each thing. Some items are addressed briefly. This is a pretty minimal text about weighting the data. It states what we'll do, calculate the probability of selection. It doesn't talk about the various stages. The data is collected in two-stage sampling process. It doesn't describe what the stages are or what the elements are for calculating the probability of selection. So probably this mentions each of the three stages, but I will probably give some feedback here that we need some additional detail, that what are the 2 stages, what are the elements that go into calculating the probability of selection in the first stage and in the second stage. Well, you know, it says Stratum and household, so it's, and there's no mention here of non-response, so we're missing one element of the weighting process. So there will be some feedback that this is a little short, we're missing one element. It's fine if you're not going to adjust for non-response, if you've made a thoughtful decision to not do that, but that would be a little surprising, so you'd need to describe why. And at the analysis plan stage, you probably wouldn't have made the decision yet. You'd be maybe describing the criteria for deciding whether to do that. So we can scroll down to weighting. We can't look at the weighting section and look at that part of the rubric at the same time, as far as I know. Does it address the topics of design weights? Yes, it does. Non-response? No, it doesn't. Post-ratification? Yes. Is it clear enough for someone else to implement? No. Could you carry out the plan? No. So you can see that for the weighting plan here, I would come down and give some substantive feedback here. And we have to remind ourselves what the numbers mean, but if we look at the numbers for weighting,
you actually have to click on the tiny little orange triangle.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go.
So requires extensive editing. It's probably a 1. So I will assign a 1 for this section. Extensive editing. There's some missing material, and I would say what that is, and then move on to the next section of the rubric. So one thing that you should finish this call with the sense that to evaluate a single creative project, you know, you need to devote, for each section of the rubric, you need to devote, I don't know, yeah, I'm sure it varies, but probably 5 minutes. Let's think of at least 5 minutes, because you're going to read the material, you're going to refresh your memory on the rubric, you're going to write some thoughtful comments, and then move on. So the analysts have 8 sections, so it might be 30 or 40 minutes per review to give thoughtful feedback to your colleagues. And of course, when you open up your feedback, you're going to hope for and appreciate that thoughtful feedback. So as Rita has said, it's time to begin now, if you haven't already, and give it the time that it deserves.
Great, thank you very much, Dale. Let's go back to Carolina also for some additional guidance. Having looked at the creative projects and really advice and suggestions to guide the reviewers, what's important, what should they focus on?
So as we finish, what's really a tip to you, it's that please do read the instructions, print them, and have the rubric next to you, because some of the questions we have received are really answered in the rubric. So just please do that. If you have any issues with like that you were assigning somebody in French, we'll deal with you to cover that. If you by now notice that, for example, you made a mistake and you forgot to add a figure, or that you forgot to do the indicator that was optional, that will be reflected in the scores. Obviously, people will give you lower scores, but we will be flagging those to make sure that they are there at the time of the final creator, which is next weekend, so not this weekend, the next one. Devote your time to really read the rubric in detail and think about it. Regarding the recommendations for the managers, I have looked at some of them are a little too vague, meaning that it's very difficult if I am receiving that recommendation to do something about it. For example, if somebody tells me improve your immunization program, I kind of know that, but I would not know how to go about it. So really think about findings from the survey itself and what you can do about it. For example, the missed opportunity to me would be something to explore based on the dropout so different for the MCV one. So it would really, one of the recommendations would be to explore why MCV, DTP1 to MCV dropout is much lower than the rest. So it could be an additional analysis, for example, that I could ask John or Dale to do. There is an issue of timeliness, for example, that some of you have noticed, those that of you who selected the timeliness table, and you notice that there are not an insignificant percentage of early doses, which is bad, because if you receive really a pertussis-containing vaccine before 6 weeks, immunologically it's not good. It's not going to have a big effect, and in fact it can even be worse for the next doses. Measles-containing vaccine also before 9 months has less effectiveness. So another recommendation could really be explore how early those doses are, and analyze why they are being given so early, particularly in areas where that's more prevalent. That kind of thing can be useful. Always think about the program and, as Felicity said, about the so what of all of this. So Red, I just put there, for technical issues, contact Hannah. For any content issues for managers, you have my office hours. I'm traveling, but if you send me a WhatsApp, I'm still here in Atlanta through Saturday morning, so that would be evening, so I can be available. Thank you so much, and almost time to finish. Scholar, Reda is creating our alumni page, so we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Carolina. Do we have time to answer Mohammed's question? Do you recommend heat maps for the coverage estimations? And then a question from Robin. People are asking if managers are supposed to work on 11 states data primarily or all of Nigeria. I understood the instructions meant we should work on the 11 states data. Maybe John can clarify the second one, and if one of you can answer the heat map question.
If by heat map, this is Dale. If by heat map we mean colored states, as we saw in one of the early examples, sometimes it's called a chloropleth map when you color the different states, then yes, that's a fine way to show coverage. You have to make a choice about the color bar and how you will categorize coverage using the colors. But that's a fine choice. It should not be the only way that you show coverage, because I've never seen a heat map representation that includes error bars. And so we want to have some indication of the uncertainty or the confidence interval. But I think map showing the spatial distribution of coverage is one helpful thing to include. Over.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Dale. Yeah, go ahead, John.
So in terms of what part of the data we are going to use, let's stay with the data that was provided. Yes, we all know where this data is from, and the reports are publicly available. But for the purposes of the assignment and for the ease of being able to comment, I think it's easier to comment on 11 strata rather than 37 or more strata. So we are welcome to look at the whole data set from Nigeria and all the reports, but for the purposes of a Scholar and this, will be sticking to the 11 strata that were provided.
And this is for the survey managers that you're referring
yes,
to, right?
This is for the survey managers. Yeah, thank you that, Reda.
All right. Okay, thank you. So we are now over time, but this is an especially important session as we're just as we know you're working on, you're gearing up to do peer reviews and have 3 to do by the end of the week. So again, as we've reminded you in the previous modules, this is really the part where your colleagues depend on you. So if so it's not just about you being late or you not being able to complete your work. If you do not honor this commitment you've made to your colleagues, you will be doing a disservice to them. And we have seen situations in which participants who made every effort to submit on time 3 peer reviews and received 0 or 1 peer review in return. So yes, that we really hope that however busy you may be, and we're sure many of you are crazy busy as you're moving towards the end of the year, that will you'll make that extra effort and carve out the slice of time you need to properly review and give feedback. So thank you. I see some comments from Ashwini. It was very informative. It made my queries clear. From Marie-Ève Burny, thank you for clear explanations. Have a nice end of week. From Gnur Fateon, Draman Palenfo, and Sidi Endai. More thanks being expressed. So if you need to go now, please please do. The formal weekly discussion group is now over. But if you have specific questions, either technical ones, if you'd like to do a refresher of how to perform a peer review, for example, I'm happy to provide that. If you have questions for, I believe, I'm hoping that John will be, at least John will be staying over to have a little bit more of an informal Q&A. Please do stay, and maybe I will start with a refresher on how to do a peer review. So, all right, I do see, let me see, okay, I see Mohammed Imran Qureshi's hand is up. So let's see, Mohammed, if you do have a comment or question.
So, thank you very much, Rada. Just a small piece of question, that a lot of graphs and figures have already been shown and a lot of comments has already been discussed, so we have got much clarity now. So just a small piece, that we haven't seen some graphs with the confidence intervals and weighted graphs. So would it be possible to show some such graphs, although Carolina has given some resource links so that we can be able to go there and just see? But if at all been possible by John to show it over here, that would be very nice. Thank you.
Yes, there were some that were weighted and included the confidence interval. So Reda, if you can go back to the third graph, I think it was. That one, for example, those are weighted, and the lines are the confidence intervals. So so the lines in the bars, so those are weighted with confidence intervals. And then the next one, the big one, the one that created a little debate, if you go down, 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 the last graph, that is also weighted, and it also includes the confidence intervals. And it's even said in the title that is weighted. So, so those are some examples, yes. Over.
Thank you, Carolina. Mohammed, does that address your concern or question?
Yes, very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, wonderful. All right, and thank you, course team, for yes staying over. So, are there other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll go through the quick walkthrough. But I think of the peer review process. Let's see. Okay, let me just share my browser window. And again, this should be just a refresher. You've done this twice already, and you know it. And yes, Lydia, if you need to go, please do. Let me try to make my window as large as possible. And so here, you know, it all starts with notifications. So you go to notifications and look for review requests. So I'm using my admin account in this case. So review request will be, so feedback request. And you can see actually some, yes, I obviously, as an admin of the course, I'm not receiving feedback requests to peer review works. But you're seeing some feedback requests related to other courses. So you will see the one related to your either the survey manager or survey analyst project, respectively, and we'll need to click on view work. So if, for example, to use the same project that Dale was looking at, or going to do the review. So one important thing to note is that for the analysts, we have not turned on annotations. Annotations are off, but only for the analysts. So yes, You do not need to worry or think about annotations in order to submit your peer review if you are an analyst. Conversely, if you're a manager, you do need to add at least one annotation in order to be able to submit your peer review. And we know even if having repeated this in the tutorials and here and in the WhatsApp group, we know we'll still be getting questions about that. That's okay. Just, if you get stuck, reach out to us. You have many ways to do so. So, as Dale showed during the discussion group, of course, you do have access to the rubric here. And I just there have been a few people who have had trouble, I think, locating the material related to the Creator project in the community. So here I am using the magic link to view updates from administrators from the course team. And so, for example, let's go look for the manager Creator project. Remember, there are two pieces to it. So it's not two parts as we had in module A2, it's just sort of two separate documents. The first document are the instructions, and the second document is the rubric that you'll be using for peer review. So here you can see the rubric for the manager, and if you scroll further down, you can see that there's another Survey Manager Creator project, but this time it's the instructions. So just in case obviously you've had to go through these in order to submit your project, but just in case, just to avoid confusion as you're working on peer review, and because as Carolina and Dale and John all emphasized, there's a lot of guidance, a lot of the points that are important, that are highlighted in the rubric and the instructions, and that's where we want you to what we want you to be looking at and thinking about when you're reviewing and when you're giving feedback to your colleagues. So here, as you can see, the rubric update has actually in the update the full text of the rubric itself, but also has the download link so that you can download the rubric as a PDF. I think actually this will probably download, yeah. All right, so I won't be able to show it to you because I don't have a way of loading it into my browser, but you've seen the rubric PDF hopefully by now. So it's handy to have that. Many people will print it. It is, you're not just being asked for your opinion about the Creator project, you're being asked to evaluate against these criteria, carefully selected and designed by the course team. Now the instructions are also relevant to your peer review because obviously part of what you're evaluating is the extent to which the author actually followed the instructions in developing their projects. So these are the instructions, and remember, instructions plus rubric equals Creator project. So here you have the full set of instructions, but it tends to be more convenient. You can download these instructions as a Word or a PDF document, or you can download the entire package, which includes the instructions and the rubric. So that's probably the easiest way to do it. Now, a note that we have published a couple of, let's say, erratum or corrigendum, to the project. So there are updated files. So you do want to look in the comments to make sure that you're actually downloading the latest set of files. And again, we do encourage you to share as you're working on peer review. We do encourage you to also be using the comments here. You can contact the course team. The benefit of leaving a comment here, if you're struggling or challenged by something in peer review, is that all of the other participants can see it as well as the course team. So both your question or challenge or comment and the course team's response. So we do encourage you to first add a comment, of course. There are also the office hours and all the other ways in which you can reach out to us. So I could show you the same thing for the survey analyst. So again, if you go If you go through here, you will find for the survey analyst creator project, you will find both the rubric and the instructions. And you do need both of those. And then, of course, you have the full zip archive that contains all of the documents related to it. So again, even though you've gone through this when putting together your project and submitting it, just want to just review that you should have all these pieces in hand and in your mind as you're looking at people's projects. And then, as actually Dale did a wonderful job of showing how to do the review, for each criterion, you're going to want to just look at the, read through these. And the time-consuming part is that you do need to have, unlike the concept note rubric, which was very simple, very linear, each criterion corresponded to one part of the rubric. At least for the manager project, maybe even more so than for the analyst project, you do have some criterion that are cross-cutting, so that you won't necessarily, in order to properly evaluate that criterion, you won't necessarily just look for the section. Just look for the section with the title of the criterion and just evaluate that. You'll have to give due consideration to the whole of the project and then think about and identify this cross-cutting issue and then evaluate that. So format and presentation is actually one that we've had in every project. And that's an example of a cross-cutting criterion. So obviously, you're looking at the logical structure of the entire plan. You do not have a section here called format and presentation. And so some people have used the rubric criteria to organize their projects. That's okay. Just keep in mind that you're not just looking at what's under that criterion when it's a cross-cutting one. You do have to reflect and think back and consider the whole in order to formulate your feedback. I have seen very few people so far have submitted reviews. That's consistent with behavior in previous, but I did see one particular project where one person in fact did came away, obviously as a reviewer, came away really impressed with a project, and that's fine. There are some excellent ones, but then the feedback consisted of saying, excellent with an exclamation mark. So as we've discussed, obviously, if there are strengths, it's good to highlight them and recognize them, but really your job is to explain what is excellent about the project. And this has a benefit for you also to sort of weave out, okay, so you can read something and sometimes you just intuitively know, oh wow, this is really good. This person has done an excellent job. And that's legitimate. But your job and to support your own learning process is to go further than that. Your responsibility as peer reviewer, even if you give a 4 and yes, first of all, you want to make sure you've move the little cursor, and then you actually want to explain why is it excellent. Is it that the figure or the data visualization is sort of combines all of the right ingredients, as we've been some of them we've been discussing today? Is it that the recommendations are tightly aligned to the survey objectives and are specifically grounded and explicitly grounded in the data analysis and its presentation? What is it that makes this excellent? Being able to describe and explain excellence and strength in is at least as important as being able to identify what is wrong, what needs improvement, what is weak, and I think that's really important to keep in mind as you do these peer reviews. And now I don't see any hands raised or questions in the chat, so I would love to turn to John and for his advice and guidance about the peer review process, let's say for the manager's project. So let me go look at that. Let me just bring up, whoops. Yeah. John, if you're still, yeah. How would you advise peer reviewers to go about their work? Looking from the substance side, with respect to the survey manager's task of putting together and presenting results and then presenting recommendations linked to the results and linking back to the survey objectives.
Okay, thanks, Reda. So there is really not much difference in the peer review process between the survey managers and the analysts that Dale described a few minutes ago. So the most important thing is to use all the tools that we've acquired since we started this course in terms of the peer review process. And I think that is the most critical, that whatever you're giving, whatever feedback you're giving, first of all, you have to choose the language and has to be helpful to the person who you're reviewing their work. Having said that, I don't think there's beyond those beyond the points that they raised and beyond what I've just added, there is anything very much different in the review process. I hope by now we are familiar with using Scholar, how to rate, how to give comments, and how to submit our comments. So those are the points that we need to be careful that we have them. And if anybody at this point has forgotten or are not sure of how to do it, maybe then we can repeat that part so that we get our reviews in time so that we can finish this course in the planned time. Thanks. Back to Reda.
Great, thank you. Thank you, John. So, right, Mohammed has a question. Kindly explain about publication of these projects. So, we have not done this for any of the 3 modules, but I will show you, let me see if I can show you an explicit example to show you what that looks like. So first of all, publication is about sharing with the community. We're not talking about, a formal publication. So for example, with a previous course with the World Health Organization, you see here the course community. This should be familiar to you. And then here we have the publications, which are really all of the course projects prepared by the participants who were successful and who completed the course. So we're hoping to do the same with the Survey Scholar projects, so that members of the Survey Scholar communities will be able to look at each other's final projects. So of course you only see 3 in the in the process of the course itself. You hear about a few additional ones in the discussion group, but there is value, and you may find it interesting to go look at how a diversity of people, the diversity of participants in the course have actually, in our case, in the context of Survey Scholar, developed the assignment around the same, the same instructions and the same context. In other courses, each participant will develop a context-specific project, and that tends to be even more interesting than to look at how different country colleagues have developed a project. So that's and so that's one. The other dimension is that when you are successful in completing a project, you will see that on your profile you'll be able to display the fact that you have a completed project, and other your peers that you're connected to who can see your profile will be able to go look at the work that you have developed. So in some cases, I mean, certificates are the sort of going currency for training, but we also believe that the certificate doesn't tell the whole story, and that really the best way to to look at what a person is, to determine what a person is capable of developing, is to actually go and look at the project, at the coursework that they developed. So for example, this is Mathilde Damuliza, and this is the project that she developed in the June 2016 in the first WHO GRISP pilot. So you can proudly display the fact that you have completed a course, not just with your certificate, but also by actually showing the work. And yes, indeed, Mathilde is one of the GRISP alums who is with us in the Survey Scholar course. So that is, we're hoping to follow the same process. Even though in this case, we've all been working on the same content, and we do have a concern as we do more of these courses around the issue of plagiarism for future courses, so how to preserve confidentiality around specific course content, but we've got some creative ideas about how to address those issues. So that's a long answer, but I understand that after, but we believe this is a really powerful way of recognizing your the level of commitment and effort that you've put into these 3 modules. Okay, and thank you, Dharmesh. You say publications are a great idea, and Mathilde is pleased to see you on the project. Mathilde, before we go, we have a few minutes left. If there are burning questions, let me know. I'm happy to address them, but would love to hear from you about your experience from starting with the GRISP pilot and now into week 15 of Survey Scholar. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to finish my peer review.
Yep.
Yes, and I'm very interested in this learning process, as I am now helping my country developing the survey protocol, and I'm also trying to help my program to analyze post-campaign evaluation results. I'm very interested with this one.
Okay, that's that's very good to hear. We'll be asking you for your feedback, and we're especially interested in if and how you are able to use what you are learning here and able to apply it to to the real world problems that you're dealing with every day in your professional work. So we'd love to hear more from you about that in the feedback survey. And we've been we've been trying to think of various ways in which to diminish the load for this final module, given that we have 1 less week. But we are going to be asking for your feedback, and that's very valuable, the time you put into sharing your experience of the course and help us improve future experiences like this. So, whoops. Sorry, Mathilde, go ahead.
I was saying that the feedback I am receiving from the peer reviewers and from the course team, they are very important. As here in Rwanda, we have conducted MR campaign, vaccination campaign. We have also conducted this year the vaccination coverage survey, and I was involved in reviewing the report because it has been conducted by an independent organization. The report I am also involved in reviewing and give comments. We are also conducting the post-campaign evaluation. The results are not yet there, but among the members who will review the results and give comment on the report.
Great. Okay. And as Carolina has said, we are setting up a community specifically for successful completers of the Survey Scholar modules. So, and we're hoping to do more sharing and conversation. We've been obviously very much focused on delivering yes, in this course. But there's also, now that we know each other and have been working together so intensely, we're hoping that that energy will give us motivation to share our experiences and to help us help support each other's work going forward into 2018. That's part of my answer for Mohammed Imran Qureshi's question. Any plans for Module B? So we're basically, we believe more than ever, having seen the level of commitment and determination, I certainly believe these that Module B needs to happen. So that just now there's Carolina should be updating you yes on this hopefully very soon. All right. Thank you, Matilde, and thank you all. Thank you, John, for kindly staying on and sharing your feedback and advice. Many of you, I don't know if you've all been to the analytics, but you can get some feedback, and you basically get, by just clicking around, you can see what this graph is telling you, and we also welcome your feedback if you find this useful or not. So. Great. Wishing you well this week. Do make sure you have that time carved out in your schedule to actually do these peer reviews. Please honor the commitment. You have done so in the previous modules. So please do not let your colleagues down this week. Looking forward to seeing these peer reviews coming in, and we will be calling for volunteers just in case. As a preventive measure, I'm convinced that we will not need additional peer reviewers, but just in case, I'll be posting an update and asking you to, if you are able to volunteer in the comments. Of course, you need to finish your 3 first, and then if you're ready, if you're ready to do additional ones that can help fill in some of the gaps. Of course, there are people who do have legitimate reasons that will prevent them from completing their peer reviews. So we do appreciate you if you can let us know early if that could be your case, and if you could also let us know if you're willing and able to perform additional reviews. All right, I'm going to unmute everyone. And
hi guys.
Wishing you a great rest of this week, and looking forward to Monday, because Monday will be the final week of these 3 digital learning modules.
And then obviously all the participants around the world, thank you very much.
Thanks everybody.
This course is helping a lot in our daily routine job methods, presentation, trainings. Thank you very much once again.